Hello everyone, I'm Colin Canet. Today I'm going to talk about a tool we almost never use in the woodwork shop, and that's an oscillating tool. So stick around and let me show you some of the things that I've come up with. Now this is just a small representation of the kinds of blades that you can get. So they come First of all, they come in different widths, so you can see the different widths. You can see some of them are rounded on the front, some of them are square, some of them are carbide tipped, and those are for special purposes. This particular one is round, and this one is for drywall, and it actually says right on it what it's for. And there's also some sanding and grinding tips that you can get that attach right on the bottom there, and they're a hook and loop. So you just put the sandpaper on there, and it clips down there nicely. That's just a bit of a representation. Now, the other thing I want you to look at for a second is if you look at the ends of these, they look like they've all got a different attachment, a different way of attaching. Look at every one of these, or most of these are different, and I'm going to show you how that works. So the way the blades work is they're generally fastened on by this bolt, and when you take that off, when you take the blade off, you'll find that there's often a template underneath, another plate that you can use. And the reason for that is because when you go to the hardware store, you don't want to have to try and figure out what kind of a base your oscillating tool has, and that's why they make these adapter plates. So I can pick any one of these, and when you put that on there, you just need to figure out what your adapter plate is. It fits on there and go like that, and that's all ready to go. I just need to put that screw in there and tighten that down. Now, the other thing that's handy with multi-tools is I've got this thing stuck in sort of the way it shows from the factory whenever you look at pictures of it. And this is one way of using it. But look, you can take that tool and take that blade in there, and you can turn that blade around if I loosen it a little bit more. And you can put it sideways. It'll fit in sideways. It'll even fit in reverse. And sometimes, and you'll see in a moment when I cut some slots here with it, that this is actually a little bit better angle, believe it or not, where you have it like that, where you get a little bit more control. In recent years, the blade development has really been a vast improvement over what it was even just a few years ago. Now, there's all sorts of different blades that you can get for these, and it really depends what you're cutting. And what I can tell you, regardless of the tool, the most important thing with a multi-tool is your blade. The one thing you're not going to want to scrimp on is your blade. And for example, this one, you can see that it's got a little bit of a curved edge on. This is a wood blade, and it's for cutting through wood, and it's developed so that it will cut quickly and cleanly in wood. But if I try and cut a nail with that, you know what? It's going to damage that blade so much that it's not going to work properly. The other blade that I have is a carbide, and it's specifically designed for cutting through nails and screws and things like that, so that you don't ruin an expensive blade like that. And yeah, it takes a minute or so to change these blades, but you know, in the end, you're going to save a lot of money buying blades. Now, there are some blades that are developed, like this one here, for wood and for metal, and you could argue that this one will cut wood, but if you look at how fine it is, sure, you can cut wood with that, but it's very, very slow, and you'll find that with a blade that does wood and metal, they're very, very fine. And although they do both, they're not as good. Of course, they're not as good as carbide, because they don't have the same hardened teeth. So it really does make a big difference when you're looking at blades. Now, one of the big uses I'm finding for using a multi-tool, and I know a lot of you don't have CNC machines, but just so that you can see, that there are some applications for it. When I'm cutting things on my CNC, for example, I have to leave what they call little tabs. And you can see there's some remnants of one there. There's another one here and another one here. And the reason for that is when the blade goes, when the router bit goes around, it goes along and it does a jog over top of, see, it does a jog over top of that and it leaves that. And that's so that when you're cutting it out, this thing doesn't move around. If you didn't have tabs in there to keep it in place, this thing would start moving around when it got close to the cutting edge. So that's one of the reasons that I sort of revisited this tool, because it's not a tool that we commonly use. But when I did that, I found some other interesting things that we can do, and that's what I want to show you now. So this tool works by moving the blade back and forth very quickly. Now, it's important to understand that, because the first thing I'm going to cut off here, I'm going to show you how to cut off a nail. Not that you need to see a demo of it, but if you see, I've just barely got this nail in like this and it kind of wiggles around at the top. If I were to try and cut this nail towards the top, what happens is the tool is going to move that thing back and forth. It's not going to cut it, because it's going to grab that nail and move it back and forth. So when you try and cut something that's not firm, the tool isn't going to cut it properly. It needs to be either well braced, or in this case, deeper down in the wood. So I'm going to knock this down a little deeper. And now, there's still a little bit of wobble up there, but I would never cut a nail up that way anyway. Usually we're going to cut it down here, and that's what I'm going to do. Okay, and that's going to be warm because there's been quite a bit of pressure on there. But see that's a nice clean cut on that. And that takes a while to go through something that thick, because that's a steel nail. Now I've taken a moment to change the blade, and I've got the wood blade in there, and I'm going to start off by cutting off this dowel. And that dowel right now is on the end grain, but it could be on the edge grain as well. And if it's a piece of furniture and you don't want to mar it, the best thing to do is to lift that blade up a little bit. And one of the things you can use is even just a piece of cardboard, and you just cut a little slot in it like that, and now that blade is lifted. But look, here's what works even better. If you save some packaging, plastic packaging, this hard stuff. In this case, it's got a hole in the top and actually fits right on top. So I could just use that and go along and cut that off. Or if it didn't have that, you can again cut that same kind of a slot, and usually you can use this over and over, and it will lift that up just enough so that, particularly if it's on edge grain, so that it's not going to mar your surface, and then you could sand the rest of it down. But I'm just going to cut it off just so that you can see how quickly and easy it is to do this. And that's what a proper wood bit does. It cuts it off very quickly. And in this case, you can see that it's nice and flush. Now, what I hear from a lot of people over the years, I've heard a lot of people say, I don't have a router table and I want to cut slots like you do. And that's what really precipitated this video, was to show you how you could use a multi-tool to do that. There's that slot, and I haven't done anything to clean that up. I followed the line, and I actually made it a tiny bit bigger, so in this case it's perfect. It'll fit that bolt going back and forth without any binding on that. I could have made that a little bit smaller and filed it out a little bit or sanded it out a bit. But usually on a jig, you don't really care. All you want is good movement back and forth. And the other thing I wanted to see if you could use this for cutting mortises. Wow, that turned out pretty well. It's not as deep as I could have made it, but it's just a test anyway. Nice straight sides. I'm pretty impressed with that. But you know, this is not a substitute for a joint making tool. You know, if you're making joints, you really need something like, you know, the Dowel Max or something like that. This is, you know, think of this as like an electric chisel, for example. That's really all you're substituting that for. You know, I was just thinking, I actually could have drilled some more holes in there. It might have been made a little bit easier to get some of that wood out. But maybe that's something for another day. And that's my overview of how you could use an oscillating tool in the woodwork shop and get some better use out of a tool that you might already have. I'm Colin Cadet for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.